Good afternoon, everybody. I'm having to project a lot. I'm Joyce Chevalier, and I am the owner here in Austin, Travis County, Texas, of the Cook's Nook. And we are a food and nutrition services company here in town, focused on providing culturally relevant, delicious, nutritious meals that go into various aspects of healthcare, but also towards food insecurity. So we work with the public sector. I also have the great fortune of also being the current interim chair of the Austin Travis County Food Policy Board, which is one of the commissions here in the city. And so today we are going to have a conversation about that, because no area can develop a food plan without its citizenry being a core part of that, whether that is being led by staff and government and other groups, to individual citizens, to the companies, the businesses, in order to make a food plan actually work for a region. And we've taken on that effort in Austin, Travis County, with great help from our Office of Sustainability. He's going to kill me, and I'm going to point out that we actually have the Austin food manager. Where is he? Where's Edwin? There he is over in the corner, which is an amazing role, and they work very hard in the Office of Sustainability to actually help us think about what does it mean to have a sustainable region around food and water, also in emergency scenarios. So this is a concerted effort that has gone on for the last several years. Many recommendations came out of the Austin Travis County Food Policy Board, and those go to the City Council for consideration. That's how it works here. Anybody can be a part of the working groups. So if you live here in Austin, Travis County, we'd be happy to see you, and put input into the plan and the other work that's being done. But back to the point. So the recommendation goes to the City Council. City Council and staff considers, staff in this case also being Office of Sustainability, and then eventually a proposal is put in front of the city, and the council considers all of its options. And actually last year, the Austin City Council, also with the Travis County Commissioners, did agree to give $3 million towards the creation and development of a food plan, and several other programs are a part of that. You guys, that's really huge, that a city would actually set aside $3 million to do that. And of those dollars, they went to various projects, but explicitly about $550,000 is to develop the food plan, and that includes what we call a CAC, a Community Advisory Committee. So this is a larger committee of citizenry that are used to help develop the core tenets of the food plan. What does that mean for manufacture? How do we encourage the rules and requirements around agriculture? What does that mean for businesses? Emergency scenarios, you name it. The idea is to come up with a comprehensive plan over the next 2 years. With the CAC, and then the creation beneath that of what we call issue groups. And so those are broken out into different issue areas. The CAC is thinking about that right now. So I'm really fortunate, and I'll stop talking and introduce 2 members of the CAC who are with us today, and we're going to have a quick chat about what does that mean for the citizenry to actually affect a food plan. So I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Yvette?
Hi, everybody. My name is Yvette Lopez. I'm a social work doctoral candidate, and I reside in the Austin Colony area.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Akul Woolbright. I'm a nutritionist for Whole Foods Market, but I spend an equal amount of time out in the community, whether it is when I lived in D.C., working for grassroots lobbying agencies, or in Detroit, where I was the president for the Detroit People's Food Co-op. And working very closely with the Detroit Food Policy Council. I mentioned Detroit because there's so much work happening there to really create a sustainable food system. And I'm excited to be back home. I am a Texan, so I'm excited to be back here to bring information and perspective that can lend to the work that we're doing, but more important than that, to really listen to the voices who are already here on the ground doing the work. Those are the voices we need to listen to and elevate. I'm excited to be a part of the CAC.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. Many people don't realize that there are in various cities around the U.S. Concerted efforts to create and develop complex, I won't say complicated, they're also complicated, but complex food systems and food system plans. As a matter of fact, part of our work with the Office of Sustainability is that the body sort of look at these examples, whether it is a system in Vermont, system in California, Michigan, Detroit, various areas. They are ahead of us in this game about how to create something that actually makes sense. So to that point, I'm coming back to my questions here. What made you guys decide that, what was it about how did you hear about the fact that a CAC, Community Advisory Committee, was being developed? Where did you guys hear about that? And then what made you decide that this was something you're going to spend time in? How much time a month are you guys spending, or will be spending as part of the CAC?
So I became aware of it through getting involved with the City of Austin, applying for grants through UT Social Resource Center. In Doe Valley, which is identified as a food desert. And that's how I became knowledgeable of the Community Advisory Board, through collaboration and networking. And the reason why I decided to join is because I see this as a purpose and as a calling, and to help others who are not able to have a voice and advocate for them as well.
So I recently moved back to Austin and was making it known that I wanted to be involved in the local food scene, and someone sent me an email about the CAC forum, and I was like, oh, I need to be a part of that. I was immediately very excited because I am passionate about creating food systems and plans that can not only serve people in their day-to-day needs, but that can fill in those gaps in the event of crises or emergencies. And so the idea that we can envision a food plan for the next 100 years that can give people access to fresh, healthy food, and to be responsive to them if they do have an emergency. We see what happens when we had COVID. There was a crippling to our food system. If we have an ice storm, it can be crippling to our food system. So how powerful will it be when we can announce this plan and provide more security to the residents of Austin, Travis County, and other surrounding areas?
One of the things that may not surprise the people in this room is our Food Policy Board, the CAC, or any of these kinds of folks doing systemic work, they're led by women. By and large, they're the ones who volunteer or bring that energy for the persistent group to actually try to solve these issues. Random question, why do you think that is? Why? You guys are talking with the others now in the CAC. You guys have been building the CAC for the last couple of months, and why do you think that is?
For me, it is personal lived experience. So I am a woman. I'm also a single mother of 3 children. And so we lived this experience, as she mentioned, with the storm and with COVID. And we saw what was happening, and so, that helped me to, start making change.
Similar for me, I'm a mom, I'm a single mom, and so being connected to food has always been a part of my experience. Going back to childhood, I grew up on a farm in East Texas, and so just being connected to the farm and seeing the work that happens, and knowing that there's so many people involved throughout the entire food process, throughout the entire food system, and women oftentimes are invisible in some of those spaces, but when it comes to getting the work done and creating this type of visioning, you really do see our impact and our presence, and so I'm really happy to be a part of that.
Yeah, it's part of putting the CAC together was very much an emphasis on lived experience, not just folks who happen to own businesses or folks who are in the business of dealing with food, but it was to create a CAC that was representative of our city and our geography, but also primarily the lived experience of those and how they engaged food, to be able to inform, to make change within, or to make a system. You have to have something to be able to change it, but to actually create for us what is that plan going to look like. Can you guys talk about yet some of the things that you've discussed in the CAC? Or, what are the topics have been? I know you guys are still in early stages.
So one of the things that I have noticed throughout all of the discussions is the emphasis on having diverse representation at the table. And to make sure that we are really highlighting the work that's happening already on the ground. There's people across the different aspects of the food system already doing work. But what an amazing opportunity we have to bring those voices together to make sure their work is elevated and their voices are heard. And so I have been very impressed that throughout all of our conversations, there is an emphasis on making sure that we are listening to the voices of the people who are actually doing the work every day and who are impacted by the decisions that we make with this plan.
Yeah. If you like.
Yeah, some of the stuff that we've been brainstorming is reviewing some of the strategic plans that the city of Austin has already conducted, and also getting feedback also from the food industry on, like, we're working on surveys as well and reviewing those to go ahead and send them out to them and get feedback from them as well.
So that's a great point. So how are businesses showing up in this process? I know we have individuals in this lived experience, but have you guys had thoughts yet about what are the roles of companies in this conversation?
You know, I have not been a part of that level of visioning, so I really can't speak to that. But what I do see is that there is a concerted effort to make sure that voices across the entire plan, from local farmers to businesses, are at the table. And so when we do have our meetings, I'm looking around at all the different people who are involved, you see a very diverse representation. And I'm sure there'll be more efforts as we go forward to call those voices in even more. Whether they're on the CAC or not, we still need to call in more voices so that we can have those ideas and perspectives represented as we create this plan.
Yeah.
We also have a member, her name is Emmy, and she's working with this industry, and so that industry would be the agriculture farmers, the food industry, restaurant owners, and getting feedback from them. I reviewed some of the surveys, and one of the questions is on the COVID pandemic, how it impacted them. And I think that's also very important as well, to look into that, so we can fill in the gaps of the services that are needed.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, have you guys sort of got to the point of what is your hope at the end of the day? What do you think will come out of this? I mean, yes, there's supposed to be a plan, but what really practically comes out of this work that you guys are going to be doing for the next 2 years? And by the way, how many of you guys are on the CCA? There's 27 technically. It is a very large group of folks, and so that's pretty exciting. But what are you hoping for?
You know, so I'm going to go a little bit different direction with that. Yes, we want to have a plan that meets the daily needs of people, that can fill in for those emergencies. But I think broader than that, it's an opportunity for a cross-section of Austin food workers, policymakers, business owners to connect with each other. I mean, I see there's so much power, not just in the plan, but in the way that we are getting to know each other and the future collaborations that could really yield, because we are so much stronger together than we are apart. And I'm meeting people that I never would have known if I hadn't been a part of the CAC. I think that's happening for many people on the CAC. And I'm really hopeful to learn how we might continue past the food plan to collaborate, to draw ideas and strength from each other so that we can continue the work, because I do believe there's so much collaboration that can take place. The other thing that I really hope will happen is that we will change how the wider residents of Austin and surrounding counties will think about the food system, and that we can have an impact on making it a more inclusive conversation, not just for us working on the plan, but I hope that we can be a model for inclusivity, and that we can continue past this plan to continue to draw people into the conversation. So I'm really hoping that the impact that we have extends beyond the plan.
Go ahead.
Yes, and so pretty much I agree with Dr. Acuna, and what I would like to say is that The plan would have everything, all the working parts put together, and have abundance food for all for the city of Austin.
One of the, for you guys who are visiting and you guys who live here know this, you know, this has become an urgent issue here for us. We have been very affected in our food system by COVID-19 and by Storm Uri. And for you guys who may have seen the news, even the storm this year, you know, there's a disruption that happens in Austin. Most people don't sort of realize that 99.5% of all the food in Austin, Texas comes in on I-35 on a truck. Austin, Travis County loses, what was it, Edwin, about 16 acres a day, was it, or so, of usable farmland. So, you know, the idea that when something happens, climate, weather, and I'll make the distinction, or whatever that may be, it's going to affect us on our tables. When everything comes in on a truck on a road, and you're not in the business of any sort of self-sustaining structure, self-sustaining agriculture structure, or production structure, which is, you know, the state of things in, you know, one of the most successful cities in the United States right now. The idea that we are just starting on a food plan has become incredibly, incredibly urgent. The numbers, even for food insecurity in Austin, Travis County, run anywhere about 15 to 18%, depending on if you're an adult or child. That's chronic, right? And then, of course, that spikes in emergency scenarios, or, you know, a lingering scenario like COVID-19. It was pretty real here, and most people don't sort of realize that about our arena. So we were really glad as a food policy board member that the city council did take this up finally and create the resolution that's, you know, created the plan for the plan effectively from those guys, which is now being executed upon. Before I get to you guys and see if you have any questions, what is next? Do you guys know what's next for the food plan? You guys are doing surveys right now. You're reviewing the previous recommendations and materials and ideas. Do you guys have a sense of what might be next from the surveys, or what you guys are thinking about?
Well, I can't speak to the surveys, but I think one of the things that's next is for us to really, you know, decide on our leadership structure and to really start finding ways to move the work forward. As you mentioned, it's a large group, you know, right under 30 people. And so it's going to be a challenge, but a good challenge to find out how to have those open conversations, but at the same time really be really focused and linear to move the conversation forward. And that's the part I'm always really excited about, like how do we really bring form and shape to the work that we do, so we leave with a plan that actually does what it needs to do to improve food access to the people who need it the most. And I want to say one little thing about that part. When you live in a city like Austin, there's so much privilege, and you can walk Town Lake, and it's a city of beautiful people, and everyone's happy and just joyful. It's
some odd stuff going on, you know, around here, pretty seriously.
But it can make people who don't have access to basic things invisible. And I want us to always remember that there is always this other side in these cities that we need to be really mindful of. I want to tell a brief story.
Sure.
I said that I'm a nutrition educator. I do nutrition programming around the country. And oftentimes when I'm in nutrition conferences or medical conferences, I hear things that are alarming to me. People have said to me that people of color, low-income people, don't want to make bold lifestyle changes. They don't have any goals when it comes to nutrition and medical outcomes. People have said this to me, that they don't eat salad, they don't care about increased access to produce, and they'll defend that and justify that by saying things like, we know this to be true because they're not compliant with their pill regimen, their doctor's appointments, or their annual screening, so therefore we know everything else about them. And so these are the kinds of things we're up against. We want to make sure that we're not making decisions for people, but that we're giving everyone the same access to information, opportunities, resources, and something as basic as food, so that they can make the choices they need to make for themselves and their families. And so I just think that this plan, I keep saying this, but has an ability to go so much further when it comes to the recognition of people and the real struggles and the empowerment that can come out of this in the end.
Yes, I agree with Dr. Acuna. We are planning on putting the empowerment theory framework model into the food plan. And at the moment right now, we're working on the proposal for the co-chair leadership roles. And we're both gonna try and see if we can be in it as well.
Can you describe the roles, the cultural leadership roles?
The co-chair.
Oh, the co-chair, yes. So one thing you might notice is, yes, I may sit on the Austin-Travis County Food Policy Board as a commissioner, but one of the things that we clearly did was to create a structure on the food plan that was not dependent on the members of the Austin-Travis County Food Policy Board. It had to be separate from us and work with them, but not influence them, not determine how that works. Yes, we are all volunteers too, who sit on the Austin-Travis County Food Policy Board, and I see our former chairs right here too, Sharon Mays. We have a role to play as those who make recommendations to the City Council, and we've done that. And the City Council, hello, that is Commissioner Brigid Shea coming in here. I'm going to switch seats here and let you go right here, Brigid. You want to go here? Fine. How are you? I'm good to see you.
Hi, how are you?
And so it was very important to distinguish our role and requirements and expectations from the citizens who were determining the food policy, the food plan for the next 2 years, and let them do that and create that structure with guidance, of course, with the consultants and with the Office of Sustainability. So yeah, you guys don't know, this is actually amazing because this is Brigid Shea. She is the Travis County Commissioner for Precinct 2. Travis County happens to be my precinct, my commissioner. I'm going to bring you into the conversation real quick. So we've been talking about what the CAC does and how, of course, that's separate from us. And what their hopes and goals are in the CAC around creating the food plan. But just from your perspective as a commissioner, why did you guys, and of course the City Council, why did you guys decide that make this investment now? What does it mean to say, okay, yes, we need to have a food plan? And of course that includes water as well, but if you don't mind addressing that just a little bit.
I think probably the pandemic was the big wake-up call for most people. But I've also been working on climate issues in Texas for 35 years, and it's clear, if you're paying any attention, that climate change is going to dramatically alter everything. I mean, we just can't conduct business as usual, and it's going to particularly affect this region of the country, our ability to grow food, frankly, for people to even remain living here. We will see extreme heat, extreme drought, and we'll likely have to, frankly, relocate people from many parts of the U.S. So with that happy little intro, hi everybody.
Thanks, Brigid, for coming, Commissioner Shea.
And I feel like I should have a warning sign every time I get asked about these things. But the other part of it was because there was so much chaos and disruption with the pandemic, I think that made clear to everyone that we can't just rely on far-flung places to grow our food, on just-in-time distribution networks to get our food to the population. And I started to hear more people during the time of the pandemic talking about, gee, how can we grow more food locally so we're not so dependent on
The trucks, I was talking about the trucks that bring in overwhelmingly our food.
supply chains, exactly, that can get disrupted. So that was definitely a part of it. But I think it also grew out of the Sustainable Food Policy Board, which had been in existence previously and had done incredibly important work, and Joy's been a key part of that as well. So it's kind of a continuum, but really the pandemic was a giant wake-up call for a lot of people.
Yeah. Was it, I know that, and I'll let you guys know, our commissioners in the city have been responsive around RFPs, around just generally around food access. different types of food access. But there's still larger issues at play around land use.
Absolutely, but I actually have to brag on Joy here because she was my teacher in so many ways. When the pandemic started, Joy called me and said, because she works in the food world, and she said, there are so many people with large refrigerators and freezers full of food, and they can't sell it now because we shut down all the restaurants. I mean, we shut down South by Southwest. It was an incredibly painful, difficult decision for our community and for the leaders who had to make that decision, because we did it about a week before the start of South by. It was just traumatic on so many levels. But Joy, being in the food world, said, all this food is going to go to waste. What can we do about it? And so she began putting together the systems to cook the food and distribute it to people who were suddenly food insecure.
Wow.
I don't know what it was like in your communities, but we had massive lines of cars of people lined up for food banks to get groceries, and they were in tears in some cases. They were ashamed. They had never been in this situation before, and suddenly they had to go get food donated to them because they lost their job.
Yeah, they were all
couldn't pay
new.
their
That was just the new
bills.
population. We had
Right.
numbers that spiked to about 23-24% of the population here suddenly became food insecure during that time frame.
But Joy put together this whole system so that as much as possible, the food wouldn't rot in people's restaurants' refrigerators. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think part of one of the reasons I think that all of you guys, commissioners and city council, responded was that it became clear that there was a relationship between government and our nonprofits and their safety nets. It was that was not clear, and those lines of responsibility, and how do things get funded? How do we have a constant mechanism, not just an emergency mechanism, but a constant mechanism that is speaking and working together to deal with food, regularly. And I think that is what the food plan is hoping to do. How do we have each of these verticals? How do we address land use so we create more farmers? How do we then take that stuff and put it into companies or into some sort of production, right? Then how do we deal also with access, right? So that everybody has a part to play in this conversation. We have to. The businesses have to come to the table as much as the individuals come to the table, make demands, because part of it was the fact that community members' voices had to be heard in this. They wanted food to reach them in a certain way, or they wanted certain kinds of food, and they have the right to ask for that. So all of that had to be included. So very quickly, what is the commissioner's hope around why you've gone into this? We now have a plan. It's going to be a 2-year plan. We've got the CAC that's being developed. What is the commissioner's hope around this? When they think about county commissioners, of course, at county level.
Yeah. I can't speak for my colleagues. There are a total of 5 of us. I don't know what the counties are like where y'all are from, but in Texas, they're so weird. The saying is, there's 254 counties in Texas. And the saying is, if you know one county, you know one county. They're all different. The only uniform thing is that every one of them has a county judge who's not a judge, so that's really confusing too. I think it's a leftover from pioneer days when they needed somebody in really remote areas who could figure out what to do with criminals or whatever.
True.
So they're not judges, but they're called judge, and then there's 4 commissioners, and I'm one of 4 commissioners. So I can't speak for the rest of my colleagues, except that I think we're all pretty much on the same wavelength with regard to having a real commitment to basically humane programs. And we haven't had a whole lot of discussion as a body about what we want the CAC to do, but I can tell you what I want and what conversations I've been having with folks. We counties in Texas have kind of narrow jurisdictions, but we've been very creative about sort of elbowing out the edges and trying to trying to do more than the typical county. I think because we have a very progressive community. I think we have a very creative community, super responsive community that's very engaged with local government by and large. And so there's a lot of interest in trying to preserve land, both for environmental reasons and then also for community need reasons. And that's particularly true in the western or the eastern part of the county, because there's a lot of what's known as black land prairie, which is rich agricultural soils. The western part of the county, we've got a...
Not so much with the fault line.
Yeah, exactly. The fault line really differentiates. It created the Colorado River. You've got the uplift to the west and the plains to the east. But so we have been purchasing land. We as the county have been purchasing lands along the two major eastern creeks to the east of this area, Gilliland and Wilbarger. And our goal is to create public trails, public access, and a riparian corridor that will preserve and maintain the creek areas. And in the process of buying that land, there's additional farmland attached to the access to the creeks. You can't just buy the creek frontage, you gotta buy the land that comes with it, and in many cases, it's some acreage of farmland. And so I've been encouraging our staff for us to look for ways to make that land more available for agricultural uses. In some cases, there were pre-existing contracts that came with the land, but they're mostly for growing hay, for animal feed, or for grazing cattle. There's only one case I know of, and you probably know it too, with the multicultural immigrant council.
MRC's land, yeah.
They work with the immigrant community, and they have now partnered with John Beal, who we did a conservation easement with. The way the county, and I think other local governments do this too, can acquire land is generally one of two ways. You either buy it outright, or you purchase a conservation easement, which is essentially purchasing the right to develop that land. So it remains permanently undeveloped, other than for agricultural uses, but the land can remain with the family. Because there's a lot of generations of farmers in Texas that want to hang on to their land, have a harder and harder time to do it because of property taxes, but a conservation easement can allow them to keep the land. So John, we purchased a conservation easement from John Beal, and he partnered with the
MRC. This is the Multicultural Resource Refugee Coalition.
That's it. And they work with refugee groups, and in particular those that come from agricultural societies. They've partnered with John so that those groups can farm on his land, and then harvest the crops and sell them.
And go to market.
And they're partnered, and they sell their product at a farmer's market under the name New Leaf Agriculture. And I know about this because my husband is a beekeeper, and he has hives on the land, and the bees help pollinate the crops that they grow.
But I think the hope is
But I want to do more of that. I think the county could do more of that.
Well, I'm going to say, I think part of that is in the plan, right? You have to set aside and talk about different kinds of land uses, best uses of land uses, acquisition of that land use, and then the programs to actually have people and have access to that land, purchase that land, or use that land, so we can actually increase the agriculture that's actually grown here in Austin, Travis County.
And we're a step ahead on that because we've already purchased the land or have easements on it.
Yeah.
So I'd love to encourage more groups to do that.
Yeah. We've got a few minutes left. I want to see if any of you guys out here have any questions just about how folks are approaching it, or what does it mean to sort of put together a food plan? Do you have them in your communities where you come from? Any quick questions for these guys? Go ahead.
Here local.
Can you speak up? Or is there a microphone?
I live here locally, and I want to get involved. And I just kind of
Yeah, absolutely. So he's asking about how to get involved in some fashion, that he's actually local and live here, and how to do that. So there'll be a couple of ways to do that. Oh,
sorry, another question.
sure. Oh, that's interesting. Have you guys talked about that at the county?
Shopping malls, there's dead industrial spaces all over town. There's an old, I think they keep garbage
Yeah, the old home.
Oh,
old
you mean
Home
like at
Depot.
183
Yeah.
and St. John?
No, it's the recycling. It's the carts. They don't
Yeah.
store them full of garbage in there. It's the empty. It's the
Just
empty
the
carts
carts.
before they distribute them to people.
I don't know if you guys have talked about that and about using, repurposing spaces, building spaces.
You know, again, because the county has such a skinny
Yeah.
kind of authority, and we have really tiny budgets compared to the city. We haven't had the luxury to do that. Although I will say the buildings that we do have for county services in the downtown area, we have been very aggressive about using something that the city does offer, which is treated wastewater to be used in place of treated drinking water for non-potable uses. And most people don't know this, but the largest use of water in a big building like this is for, any ideas?
Toilets?
Everybody says toilets. Any other suggestions? Air
Air
conditioning.
conditioning.
Most people don't know that, but 90% of the water use in a big building is for air conditioning. Especially in hot climates, they use evaporative cooling. There's big cooling towers, and they evaporate off water to generate the energy for the air conditioning. So we've swapped out the water supply for our air conditioning systems on our 4 main buildings downtown, and we're trying to get the city to run the purple pipe to the brand new courthouse we've built at
your new building.
17th and Guadalupe. But we're offsetting about 40 million gallons of drinking water a year permanently. And because this region is going to become extremely drought prone, we need to do everything we can to conserve water. And instead, for the most part, we're just using it like drunken sailors. I'm not kidding. We waste water on such an epic scale, it's obscene.
Have you guys met Brigid Shea? Thanks. So I'm going to ask you your first part of your question about how to be involved in the food plan or the policy board. So the food policy board are appointed commissioners by seats, by chairs from city and county. But we have ongoing working groups, and the working groups are where often some of the recommendations come out of. And then we as citizens lead that with other citizens. So one of the working groups is on just food access. And you're free to do that. We meet once a month, typically on a Monday. Is it third Monday? Second Monday of the month. Yes, second Monday of the month at 6 p.m. And then you can find out about the working groups, and then the working groups have their own cadence. And anybody in Austin Travis County is free to participate. For the food plan very specifically, the CAC has been selected and congregated, but they're going to start to develop their issue areas. And so the issue areas will be the topical issue areas, and you can get involved with that as well. Just ping me. I'm happy to connect you with either level, whatever you like, whatever you're interested in doing. Just catch me after this. So, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I think you're the one
Yeah,
that was
I
saying
mentioned that.
that
Yeah,
there-
other cities, but I'm going to make somebody talk real quick because he's going to ignore this. You want to talk about this a little bit, Evan, just for a minute, just for half a second? Just example of one city, one place.
Give that man a mic.
Oh, you're about Detroit
yeah.
specifically.
So I kind of queued it up. So I lived in Detroit for 10 years, and what I noticed was that in that city, so many of the businesses had left Detroit. The automobile industry had left. There was no regional or national grocery store for 15 years. And so the residents kind of took matters into their own hands. And there, at that time when I moved in 2012, were over 2,000 urban farms or small community gardens. And Detroit actually won a lot of awards for its urban agriculture efforts. The Detroit D-Town Farm is a farm of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, and they are producing food and distributing out to residents through farmers markets and other efforts. And through the D-Town Farm and the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, they developed the Detroit Food Policy Council, And that group then expanded a lot of the ability to collaborate across different organizations. And the most recent thing I was really proud of is the formation of the Detroit People's Food Cooperative. This is a resident-owned grocery store. They'll be selling natural and organic produce at a reduced cost in one of Detroit's most impoverished neighborhoods. So Detroit's actually won awards for their food efforts and their urban agriculture. And so those are some of the ideas that I want to bring to the food plan in Austin. But there's other cities that are models, many cities that are model cities for this type of work. And I think part of what we have to do as we move into the food plan process is to really look at some of those great examples, see what fits for Austin and what doesn't. Listen to things like the commissioner brought in around climate change and all these, and water usage. There's so many ideas that can end up in the issue groups that we can start to consider and find out, from, residents what they really want to see us move forward on.
Yeah. One of the programs I think about is the Good Food Program that it's being used in Michigan, and it's focused on food access and financing. And how does that work? How do you have various RFPs? How do companies and business even get to respond to those RFPs that are put out by agencies? What are the RFPs focused on? Because the RFP has to have a focus area, and so it comes out of other work eventually. Is it the RFPs and the other things that go out? But then how do you finance that, and who's involved in financing some of this work? So there's all kinds of different models. One we looked at also in Vermont and New England, which is, across state, that focuses on agriculture, also in financing, manufacturing, and others. So there are a lot of different models that go about this in a variety of different ways.
And I would like to mention something kind of on a micro level that's not on that grand scale. One thing that I saw in Detroit that I would love to do here in Austin is the Great Grocer Program. When you think about food access and food deserts, sometimes we focus on those regional and national grocery chains to provide food. Even though we didn't have those large grocery stores in Detroit, there were 67 independent grocers, but people didn't really know who they were or where to access them. They were tucked back into a neighborhood. And a lot of them were not really doing good business practices. They were rude to the community. They were culturally insensitive. They were selling rotten food, outdated meat. And so Detroit Economic Growth Corporation implemented a program with the Detroit Food Policy Council to start to grade grocery stores and to publicize those grades. And so it motivated the grocers to start doing a better job because they wanted their score to be high in the newspaper. And then after that, to give them more of an incentive, there was some funding put in place to help them to beautify their store inside and out, to change their merchandise and to get better product in. And we did some training around customer service and cultural sensitivity so they would be better partners in the communities that they serve.
Yeah, the level of ideas that are going to come out of the CAC and then also in the issue groups themselves, I think will be pretty dramatic and be real asks. I mean, a lot of us are really looking forward to it, really looking forward to it. So I have been instructed that you can find out about the food plan at austintexas.gov/food. So please do have a look at that. And we are out of time. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate it. And thank you guys.